Alright, I think we're live. Alright, so hey everyone, bachphotography here, and today we're going to try something a little bit different. This is my first attempt at streaming, so the stream might go away very quickly if something goes horribly wrong, but hopefully it doesn't. So basically what we're going to do here is we're just going to do a live stream of me editing and also getting people to ask questions and also answering some questions that were sent to me on the Facebook group. So let's get right into it. This is going to be the first image that I'm editing. This live stream is going to be quite a slow editing guide rather than the photos that I normally do, which I sort of power through the editing. So we've got about 10 to 12 photos that we're going to edit through this live stream. And if we run out, I'll get some more. Might not get to all of them, but I guess we'll see how we go. So I'm just going to start editing this first photo. So first thing we'll do is just add some clarity to the image. Looks like the stream is working now. I've got 3 people in. Cool, so if some of you guys could just write some comments just so I could make sure that the stream is actually working and that I can see your comments and questions and that sort of thing. I'll just type something in as well. Alright, so let's get back to editing this image. First thing we did was add some clarity to the photo, and I'm also going to add a little bit of vibrance as well, just because it's not looking that colourful. So the main point of this image is to sort of draw focus to this jacket here. So having a background that's not too colourful is probably a good thing, but just adding a little bit more might make the whole image pop a little bit. So you can see here that the ground is quite blue, so if we boost the vibrance up too much, it does draw focus from the viewer. So we don't want to boost the vibrance too high, we want to leave it quite low. But we want the jeans to pop, we want her to pop. There's some nice blue in her jumper as well. So what we can do is we can get the brush tool and just add some either vibrance or saturation to the brush, and then what we'll do is we'll actually add that color separately. So I think that looks pretty good, and then we'll also do the same thing to the jacket as well. Just adding a little bit, not too much, because it is already quite colourful, so if we added maybe 40 or 50 points, I think we would actually start clipping and hitting the reddest reds you can get. Yep, so that looks pretty good. So I can see there are a few people watching now. If any of you could just comment in the chat just to let me know that it's working. This is my first stream, so I'm not actually sure if it's set up correctly. I can't see anyone commenting yet. I might just go into the settings of it. Alright, so what's the next thing we'll do? The next thing we'll do is we'll smooth out some of the skin on Faye's face here. So I'm just going to drop the black shadows and exposure just so I can use this brush tool as a masking tool. The reason for that is just so I can see exactly where I've actually clicked this brush on, so that I can make sure that I don't accidentally go over some lines like that. Just because basically with this tool what I'm doing is smoothing any areas that are masked here. So if I do any areas that I want to stay sharp, such as her nostrils or her lips or anything like that, it can start making her face look a little bit blurry and a little bit soft. So you've got to be quite careful with this tool not to blur any edges you want to stay sharp. So this is one area I'm never sure whether I should do, just because I want to keep the sharpness here in her eye. But if you zoom out, that part of her eye, you can't really see, but if you sort of half zoom in, you can see that her eye does look a little bit maybe unflattering, I guess you could say. And you can always smooth that out with this tool, but at the same time you do want to keep sharpness around the eye area. So it's always one place where you could either make it nice and blurry and smooth, or you can keep it sharp. And you can go really small with this tool, but the problem is you'll start getting jagged lines where the smoothness ends. So the bigger you go, the softer the transition between the smoothing of the skin that you've smoothed and the sharpness of the parts you haven't. So that's the feather tool somewhere in here. So yeah, the feathering. If you turn this right down, you see how the black line inside this brush is closer to the end of the perimeter of the circle. That will mean that the transition is actually much sharper, which will mean that if you're doing drastic changes to the skin, for example, you can actually see where those changes stop. So you want to add a bit of feathering to this brush. You can add heaps if you want, but basically what that's doing is stopping you from being able to see a transition between where you're smoothing and where you're not smoothing. So you can see here that this part of the image is actually pretty... Oh, we've got a comment. Hey, how are you going? Okay, cool. So I know the chat is definitely working now, so that's great. So this part of her face here is looking pretty smooth. There's a few little lines here. So normally, if I was just rushing through an image, I wouldn't actually bother to smooth this out, but because this is a live stream, I've got plenty of time. There's no time constraints like those with a YouTube video. I might as well just smooth it out. And you can see here there's quite a lot of noise in the image too. And even though we're only shooting at ISO 500, if you shoot an image that has shadows that are probably a couple stops under true exposure, you can get noise even in a great camera like the A7R II. So that's just something to think about. It's always best to shoot at native ISO if possible. So that looks pretty good. Just going to get rid of those changes and then play with the clarity slider here. So I reckon I'll go down to about 35 points for this one. Face skin is actually really, really good. If you look at her face, she's got hardly any blemishes. And she's not really wearing that much makeup either, so that's pretty good. Cool, so I'm pretty happy with that. The next step is we'll just reset the brush tool again. And then I'm just going to bring some more focus to her eyes and her eyebrows by just adding a little bit more clarity, and then also dropping the shadows slowly as well. But yeah, if any of you have any questions about what I'm doing, just put something in the comments and I'll make sure to get to you. I want this to be as interactive as possible. Just going to add some to our eyes as well to make them pop. And let's have a look at that. I reckon that's pretty good. I might also add a little bit more darkness to her hair as well, just because there was a light just up here, and that basically means that because her hair is quite close to the light, that's going to be more exposed than things that are further away, like the part of her coat here. So what we'll do is we'll add about 10 points of shadows. We won't add any clarity, and I'll drop the exposure about 1/10 stop as well. As you can see, it's a pretty subtle change, but I really do think it does make a big difference to the final image. Yep, I think that looks pretty good. Okay, so one thing I'm going to do later in the stream is I'm going to do some black and white photos as well. Just because the color balance in these images isn't particularly appealing in my opinion. You can see that especially in the ground here, it's very, very blue. So I'll leave this one color, but for the next one I might do black and white. Let me know in the comments if that's something you'd be interested in looking at. Cool, so I think this is pretty much done for now. I might just brush the entire background and mess with the clarity that way as well and see how that looks. If anyone watching could just let me know how the quality of this live stream is as well. If the video is nice and crisp, or if it's really blurry or anything like that, just let me know and I can see if I can fix it up. Although from my stats it does say it looks pretty good at the moment. So on the Facebook chat, someone's just asked, why did I use 35mm for this photo shoot instead of the normal 50 or 85 that I do in most of my photo shoots? Pretty much the reason for that is just to try something new. I just bought the Sigma 35 1.4 a couple of days ago, actually the day of this shoot. So yeah, just thought it'd be a cool excuse to give it a try, expand my experience, and see what we could come up with. I reckon I might leave this concrete block out just because it's sort of not really the background, it's in the same focal plane as she is. So I won't try to blur or change that part for now. Alright, so now that I've done that, I basically have the entire background selected, I guess you could say. I just masked it and I've unmasked, well, I've made the mask invisible. So now when I change, for example, the clarity, you can see the background changes quite dramatically. So I think what I'm going to do, put that back, is see what it looks like with a little less saturation and see what it looks like with a bit more saturation. I think it looks better with more. Yes, so I might add about 25 points to that. But I do want to get rid of a bit of the blues just because the blues are kind of hectic. So we might go to about here. So before, after. Because like this, the ground is very blue and I think it looks a little bit distracting and unnatural because in the scene in real life there were more grey than they were blue. So if we just get rid of that blue a little bit, it really draws focus to her jeans and also her jacket as well. Cool, so I reckon that looks pretty good. Alright, let's jump into Photoshop and see what else we can do. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is we're going to clean up a bit of her skin. Now her skin's already really good, but there's always a few little blemishes here and there. So just going to smooth those ones out. And then what we'll do is we'll reduce some of this noise as well. So I was shooting at ISO 500, and although that is quite a low ISO, because the image actually did have quite dark shadows, there is some noise in there, so we can clean that up in a second. Now you can be quite rough with this tool because the pattern matching that this tool has. You can sort of drag things around and they still look pretty natural. So you don't have to be super careful, getting the blemish in perfect shape like that and then moving out. You can just sort of quickly smash through this step. There's a few other ways that you can clean skin up. The patch tool is definitely my favorite way, but you also have the spot healing brush tool, and then also the clone stamp, and I'm sure there's a few other ways you can do it as well. Those are the main ways, I think. I'll show you how to use the spot healing brush tool as well while we're here. Basically you just change the size to how big the blemish is, find a blemish that you like. We're going to go with this one down here, just go down a little bit, this one here, and then basically you just click over it and it goes away. Now this doesn't always work in every situation. For example, if I had a blemish right next to this contrasting line here, when you click over it, it can actually make like an unusual looking blob of skin that doesn't look naturally smooth. Let's see if I can find another example. This blemish here might actually turned out okay. This one here, for example, might not turn out so well. See how that you can see like a very visible circle where I've clicked. So that would be a good opportunity to use the patch tool, because what you can do is you can sort of drag what is next to her blemish and use that to sort of maintain the contrasting lines that you're trying to keep while removing a blemish, if that makes sense. Alright, so I just got another question on Facebook. Which do I prefer, the Canon 5D Mark IV or the Sony a7R II? Now that's a really good question. They both have pros and cons. I really do like the 5D Mark IV that I just got. Just got some racism in the comments, so that's really disappointing to see. If anyone knows how to block this guy, just let me know. Yep, let's do that. Alright. Oh, well, that's really disappointing to see. So sorry about that, everybody. Anyway, so why did I get a 5D Mark IV and a Sony a7R II, and which do I prefer? Well, it's a really tough question. I really like the 5D Mark IV because, well, for a few reasons. It's got great FPS, we've got the dual card slot, so for when I'm shooting weddings that's really important. Very fast autofocus, native lenses, lots of native lens choices. So that's why I like the 5D Mark IV. The reasons I like the Sony a7R II is the face detection. The face detection is awesome, although there aren't that many good quality, cheap lenses. I mean, obviously you've got all the G Master lenses, which are super expensive, but also really good. I do like that you can adapt Canon lenses as well. That's a really good feature, but the problem also is that the autofocus will often suffer. So a7R II also has great resolution, better resolution images than the Canon. It's also a little bit better in low light, I think. So I think probably the a7R II is my favorite, but it does have some really big issues. Now I know that some of the issues have been solved with the a7R III, and it's probably something I'm going to look into buying in the near future. But for now I reckon the a7R II is my favorite, and the 5D Mark IV comes a close second. I do use the 5D Mark IV for weddings, just because it has that redundancy backup. But I do often find myself longing for the face detection of the Sony a7R II. And you do have a face detection alternative in the 5D Mark IV when you're shooting in live view mode, but because it's a SLR camera and not a mirrorless camera, you do lose autofocus speed when you're in live view mode. Alright, so we could spend a very, very long time editing the skin here, but I think we'll move on for now. The skin's looking pretty good. Okay, just a few little spots on the bottom left. I feel like I want to remove this whole thing here, just because it's a little bit of a different color. But, I mean, because it is a fashion shoot, you do want the skin to look like porcelain. Just remove this hair as well, I think it's a little bit distracting. Alright, looks good. So the next thing I'll do, I think, is make her lips stand out a little bit more. Just add a little bit more red to her lips. So the way we're going to do that is I'm going to get the lasso tool, and I'm just going to make a selection roughly around her lips. Then what we're going to do is go Image, Adjustments, Hue and Saturation. Go to the master layer just to have a look at what colors we have. It looks like everything is pretty much the same color, which might be a problem. So what we'll do now is we'll go to the red slider, boost it all the way to the top, and see if we can isolate her lips. Okay, so it looks like her lips are, yeah, it looks like this isn't going to be possible to do this way. So what we'll do is we'll go and do, we'll do a really close selection, and then just boost it up a little bit, and then it won't look strange. If their lips, if your model's lips are a vastly different color to their skin, often you can just do a hue and saturation marker, and then just change one particular saturation at once. So we'll just go to reds, and then actually we'll just go master and we'll just boost them up a little bit, maybe 15 points. And you can see here it's looking a little strange, so what we'll do is we'll just make a selection, do a content aware deletion just to smooth out that little bit there. Alright. Okay, that looks pretty good. So the next step what we'll do is, I think it's framed just ever so slightly wrong. So I'm just going to get the crop tool, bring this in very slightly, and then we'll go the other way as well. So we'll just very slightly crop it up that way. What I'm going to do here is I'm just going to select all of this top section, making sure not to get the model. Right click and we'll free transform, right click again and distort, and I'm just going to distort all of that, maybe not quite that much actually, about there. That looks good, and then we'll do the same thing this way as well. And for that last little bit, we'll just do a content aware deletion. Yep, I think that's much better. Alright, next. So, actually, I think that's pretty much it. Yep, I think we'll leave that one and we'll move on to the next image. Alright, so the next one we'll do is a black and white. So I really don't like this image in color at all, but I think it might be an okay candidate for a black and white photo, but I guess we'll see. So I'm just going to drop the saturation all the way down to -100 to get rid of any color in the image. Okay, and then the next thing we'll do is we'll drop the shadows, drop the blacks, add a little bit of contrast, and boost up the exposure slightly. So I reckon that might be a little bit too many blacks, so I'll go back to -15. Yep, that looks not too bad. Okay, cool. So I don't normally do black and white, so this will be a cool experiment for me, and leave in the comments if you've got any suggestions as well, or any questions. So I just got another question from Facebook. If you want to check out some of the questions there as well, you can just go to the Bach Photography Facebook, or you can ask questions in the chat here too. So the question is, which is my favorite lens for portraits, 50mm or 85mm? So I think my favorite lens for portraits would have to be 85, just because of the compression you get from a telephoto lens. It's just more flattering, I think. But I really like both. I mean, sometimes you can't shoot with a 50mm because you've got space constraints, or for whatever reason. The 85 is also a lot bigger, so sometimes you just can't afford to take it. But yeah, definitely the 85. I think it just produces much more flaring images. The bokeh is better, more compression in the background, especially at low apertures. Yeah, so the 85. Although I definitely use my 50mm a lot more than I use my 85, that's for sure. And the reason for that is just because the 85 is just a lot more of a specialized piece of equipment, and sometimes you just can't use it for things like you can't use it for certain portraits in small spaces. It's just more of a telephoto lens, so there's not much of the background being shown when you're taking a photo. But yeah, it's a beautiful portrait lens. So I'm just going to reset my brush and do the skin again. Just got another question. So why do I not use presets in my photography? Well, I think that you can be a bit restricted if you decide to use a preset. And honestly, I really haven't looked that much into all the different options you have with presets as well. I do like doing everything from scratch, and I think that you can get a lot more flexibility that way, but presets is definitely something I should probably have a look into, just to sort of speed up my workflow, especially for weddings and things like that. So you can see in this photo, even at ISO 160, you do get quite a bit of noise in the shadows. So you always remember that if you can expose correctly for the entire image, obviously that's not always possible, do so if you can, because even at lower ISOs you do get noise in shadows. And always shoot obviously as low ISO as possible, well, as low to your native ISO as possible. So I should really have shot this at ISO 100, but because I didn't have that much flexibility in my other settings, I couldn't go any lower with the aperture, and 1/200th of a second is actually quite slow when you're shooting a moving subject. I wasn't really able to go any lower than 160, but yeah, even at really low ISOs you can get quite a bit of noise in images. So it's always best to shoot as low as possible whenever you can. Sorry about that, guys. Just had to hide a user's message who was being racist a little bit before. So I'm just going to do the model's legs as well, just to smooth everything out on her skin. Might do our hands as well while we're here, just because you can see some tendons and that sort of thing on our hands. So as you can see here, I mean, we're shooting at 1/200th of a second, but there's quite a lot of blur in our hands. Like when you go, really far out and you're not really paying much attention, then that's fine. But you've got to remember to shoot as high shutter speed as you can for this sort of photography, and try to get the subject to not move as much as possible. But for this photo, I think it's fine, just because you're not really focusing on the hands. It's not a really big part of the image. Okay, so once we've done that, we just get rid of the masking tool I was using here, and then we'll just drop the clarity, not that much, but this is the original image here, and I'll just zoom in so we can see a big difference. And then once we've dropped the clarity, you can see a big difference in the smoothness. So we'll go down to about 50 points for this one, just because with black and white you can go a little bit more extreme with your changes. So I think that looks pretty good. Yep, no problem. Alright, so I think that's everything we're going to do in Camera Raw. Let's jump into Photoshop. Oh. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're just going to crop out that image underneath. Yep, okay, cool. So, first things first, let's get rid of all these little distractions here. So I'm just going to use the patch tool for these. think that looks better. Next thing we'll do is we'll just smooth out her skin as well. Alright, so another question. How do you go about finding your models for photo shoots? Well, there's a few different ways you can do it. In my opinion, the best way is to go onto Facebook and just try to find modeling and photography groups in your area that specify TFP photo shoots. So what TFP is time for photos, or time for print as it's known. And basically what that is you're looking for a model and a makeup artist, and they're looking for photographers, and you all work together. Nobody gets paid and everybody gets the photos. So that's a great way of finding new models, new makeup artists and that sort of thing, to get together, do photos for free for everybody. And everyone wins, everyone gets the photos, everyone gets the experience, and yeah, it's just a win-win for everyone. So definitely the best way, in my opinion, especially when you're starting, is just go on Facebook, try to find one of these groups for your local area, and yeah, just start making some posts, explain what you want, what sort of shoots you're going for, and yeah, people will message you. Another way is you can go on Instagram or Facebook again and just find models under the modeling hashtags for your area. So for example, hashtag New York model, or whatever city you're in. And then once you find a whole bunch, just start sending them a message. Just say, hi, I'm a photographer, I'm looking for some TFP photo shoots. I think your modeling is really great and I'd love to do XYZ photo shoot with you. Let me know if you're interested. And don't be discouraged if 5 out of 6 people say no in the beginning. Just keep asking different people, and eventually you'll find some great models, great makeup artists in your area, and you'll be able to get some connections and start doing some photo shoots. The main thing really is just to ask. So another question here, are those actions you made yourself? I don't understand the question. Sorry, what do you mean by that? Do you mean this this tool I'm using here? This is just the spot healing brush tool that I'm using to clean up some skin. I'm not doing any pre-made actions at the moment, I'm just using all the default Photoshop ones. So I reckon the skin looks pretty good now. Did just get a bit of blurring here, maybe overdid the spot healing brush tool a little bit, so I might just get the patch tool and then drag that out into a lighter area. And then a little bit more here, and a little bit more just here too. Yep, I think that looks much better. Alright, so another thing I'm seeing is just a little bit of droopiness in Faye's cheek here that we can just change, and that's just because of the lighting, basically. Just a little bit more here. Okay, no problem. For this I'm using a mouse, so I'm just using a Logitech G502 mouse. So the question was, are you using a mouse or a Wacom tablet? I have looked into using a Wacom tablet. I've heard it's quite a learning curve when you're getting started, but yeah, it's definitely something I'll be looking into in the future. Alright, so I think I'm pretty much done with the skin retouching. The next thing I'm going to do here is just get rid of this this little block thing here that I don't think looks very good, and I might also get rid of this little one here. So what we'll do is we'll just, well, first of all, I think also it's not really framed that well, so I might just drag that out and drag that up there like that and see what we can do with fixing that. So first thing we'll do is we'll just make a selection of all the stuff that we're going to distort into the new frame. Right click, free transform, right click and distort, and we'll just see how far we can go. So I think it does look very slightly bent round, but I think it looks okay. And then what we'll do is the same thing here as well. So I think about there is probably as far as we can get away with. So now we'll just bring this back down to about there. Yeah, I think that looks much better. Cool, alright, so I think this image is almost done actually. Maybe what I'll do is I'll bring it a little bit lower down on this end as well. Yep, I think that's pretty good. I might go back into Camera Raw and just add a little bit more exposure onto her legs here. Half the stop probably be a bit too much, but we'll have a look. Yeah, it's a little bit too much because we're getting a little bit too much here. So I'll drop it down to about 0.4 and then just do this leg like that. So I think that looks much better. Cool. And then actually I might just do that one more time for her hand here as well. And also for her face, just like that. Cool, alright. So one last thing I'll do just to get rid of some of this noisiness here is I'm going to go Filter, Noise and Despeckle. And this really won't change the image that much from far away, but when you zoom into some of the shadowy areas you can see it looks a little bit smoother now. Alright, so I think we'll do one more image before I end this live stream. Thank you everyone for watching. So, just one more photo I think. And this one will be completely different. This one is a off-camera flash image actually. We decided to use natural light for pretty much all of this photo shoot, but I did try a few with off-camera flash as well. So, a few things I don't really like about this image, and it's that the exposure on her face is uniform the entire way, and whenever you're shooting particularly portraits you should try to have one side being lighter than the other just to add a little bit more depth to the image, but we'll see how it looks once it's edited. So let's just add some clarity first of all to get some mid-tone contrast, and then we'll drop the shadows and we'll add some contrast as well, and we will drop the blacks as well slightly. So because the exposure of her face is uniform, I might actually just add a little bit of negative exposure to one side of her face, just to sort of see if that fixes it. I think it's slightly better, but still not 100% happy with it, to be honest. So we'll just smooth the skin first of all. So just going to the brush tool, dropping the black shadows and exposure so that we have a masking like tool. And like I said at the start of the live stream, there is actually a masking tool in Camera Raw, but this is basically the same thing. So So here's a perfect example of why smoothing the skin can be really good for hands as well. So you can see because her hand was on the same focal plane as her face, even though we were shooting at a relatively low aperture, you can see all of the little details on her hand. So smoothing them out I think will make them look a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. And just making sure not to go over any of the contrasting lines as well, just so we can keep the shape and the sharpness of the image basically. Alright, so another question. Why did I choose to get the Godox AD600BM instead of the TTL Godox? Well, one of the reasons was it was a little bit more expensive to get the TTL version, and to be honest, I wouldn't really be using it on TTL anyway, so I thought I might as well just get the manual version, save a couple $100, save up for another lens. I'd really like to get a 200 f2 at some stage, which is like a really long prime basically, but they cost about $5,500 US, so they're really expensive. So it's going to take me a little while to save up for that, but I think it'll be really cool, and it'll make some really awesome portraits. So that's what I'm saving up for at the moment. So yeah, every little helps. Saving a couple $100 here and there from getting the cheaper purchase, especially when it doesn't make any difference. When you're using it on manual, on the manual only strobe, or using it on manual on the TTL strobe, it produces the same results. So there wasn't really any need for me to get the TTL version, and it meant that I can save up for cooler things as well. So I'll just zoom in here so you can see before and after with our hand. So this was before, and then once we drop it down, you just see a little bit of smoothness creep in. Just get rid of a little bit of the harsh lines here, but still keeping the entire sort of structure, and you can still see the detail as well, just making it a little bit more flattering. Okay, so now that we've done that, I might just add a little bit more clarity and bump up the contrast of the eyes. So we'll add some clarity, and then I'll drop the shadow. So basically what contrast is, it's just a drop in shadows and a boost of whites or highlights. Now that's roughly speaking, it is a little bit more elaborate than that, but that's sort of the main idea. So when I say adding contrast, I don't mean literally adding contrast, I mean adding a contrast between the darkness here and the lightness above her eye. So we're just going to add a little bit into her eyelashes there, and her eyebrows too, just to make them pop a little bit. And you can't really tell that much what I'm doing here close up, but when you move back you can actually see a dramatic difference in her eyes. So now they're really popping out. And while I'm here, because it is black and white, I can just do that to her lips too, and also just her nose holes as well. Alright, so I'm pretty happy with how this looks at the moment. I might just do what I did on the first photo and make a selection of the entire background. So what I'm going to do here basically is just change the background independent of her. I might make it pop out a little bit more with a bit more clarity. I'm not sure yet. I might actually smooth it out with a bit less clarity. We'll have a look at what both of them look like, and we'll go from there. Okay. Just going to get rid of those black shadows and exposure changes, and now we can change whether we want it to be... Oh, actually that looks really awesome. I might actually really boost the clarity. I was going to reduce it and make her pop out a little bit more, but now that we've boosted it and made it look really strong, I actually like how that looks a lot. So if we also maybe drop the shadows as well, and add some highlight, I reckon that looks pretty cool. Maybe my eyes are just broken because I've been editing for a few hours, but now that I look at it again, it actually looks kind of weird. Maybe we'll just drop the clarity a little bit and make it a little bit less hectic. Yeah, I think that looks much better. Cool. Alright, so that's everything I'm going to do in Camera Raw. Let's jump into native Photoshop. And I'm interested to know, when you change from Camera Raw into Photoshop, how long it takes to make that transition. For me, it normally takes just a few seconds, but sometimes it can take a while. So what I'm going to do here is just going to get rid of any of these dirty marks on the dress, because of the shape of these lines on her dress. It might start looking a bit weird if I go too crazy with it, but Yeah, that's really annoying actually. There we go. There we go, much better. It's still there a little bit, but for the interest of time, I'm not going to edit this too much. I think it would take about 20 or 30 minutes to really get rid of all of these blobs of dirt, but for now we'll just leave most of them, just because there are quite a few. So I'll leave that one for now. Let's look at her skin, see if we can smooth out some of these freckles. Because this is a fashion photo shoot, it is kind of important just to make the skin look super smooth. It's not really meant to be like a real life representation of Faye, and the skin already is really good, but just adding a little bit more smoothness is sort of the go-to thing in fashion. All right. Yep, so that looks pretty smooth. I might see if I can get rid of this little bump here in her shoulder, sorry. Might have to end up leaving it in, but we'll see if we can just do a content deletion and make it look a little bit smoother. Yep, I think that actually worked pretty well. So this part of her leg here is looking a lot darker than her face here, so I'm just going to go back into Camera Raw and brighten up this leg a little bit. Yep, that's much better. So before and after. Alright, so just one more final touch and then this one will be finished as well. What we'll do is we'll just get rid of some of this black mark here. I think it's a little bit distracting, and then also we'll move a little bit as well from here. Still got to leave a little bit of it in just to keep it looking realistic. But yeah, I think that looks a lot better than it did. Cool, alright, so that one's done. Alright, well that's the conclusion of this live stream. Thank you for everyone who was watching through this live stream. I really appreciate it. This was the first one we've done, and I think we'll do some more in the future. So once again, thank you very much for watching.